Tension explodes as Jimin publicly humiliates Jungkook during a family dinner, but Jungkook's unexpected response freezes especially the army. "Why would someone like you sit next to my father?" Jimin's voice sliced through the dimly lit dining room like a blade, sharp and unforgiving. The room froze. Forks hovered mid-air. Water glasses trembled in half-raised hands. The soft clinking of cutlery on porcelain ceased as every eye turned to the long table's center, where Jungkook sat in stunned silence. The slow jazz playing from the corner speaker faltered beneath the weight of the moment. Even the chandelier seemed to dim as if recoiling from the explosion of emotion. Jungkook didn't speak. Not yet. His hand tightened around his glass, the stem cold against his skin. The candlelight caught the trembling of his lashes, but he didn't flinch. He simply stared at Jimin, his bandmate, his friend, or so he thought. Jimin's mother, seated at the far end of the table in her ivory silk blouse, lowered her eyes, her smile frozen mid-expression. Taehyung, who had been reaching for the red wine, slowly returned the bottle to the table, his fingers stiff. The rest of the guests, family members, and close acquaintances from H and beyond sat trapped in a collective paralysis. "Jimin?" Namjoon muttered, tone low and warning. But Jimin didn't look away. His chest rose and fell with sharp rhythm, fueled by something deeper than irritation. Beneath the table, his knee bounced rapidly. His jaw clenched, as if forcing the words out had physically pained him. Jungkook slowly placed his glass down. The air thickened, wrapped in invisible tension. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I didn't sit here to impress your father, Jimin," Jungkook said quietly, his tone calm, even but each syllable landed like a hammer. "I sat here because he invited me." A ripple of murmurs floated through the room. Jimin's father, seated directly beside Jungkook, coughed awkwardly, shifting in his chair. Jungkook turned his head slightly toward the man who had offered him that very seat only 20 minutes ago, with a warm smile and a hand on his shoulder. "And if I remember correctly," Jungkook continued, "he said he respected those who spoke with their actions, not with their ego." Jimin's mouth parted as if to retaliate, but the words caught in his throat. Jungkook leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the edge of the table, eyes dark and unwavering. "Is that the real reason you're upset, Jimin? Or is this about something else entirely?" The question didn't need to be answered. Everyone in the room knew. The past week had been a series of unresolved glances, tense rehearsals, and whispered arguments off camera. Rumors had already begun to stir of creative differences, of Jimin's growing frustration with the spotlight shifting toward Jungkook during their recent overseas press run. But no one had expected it to come to this. Not in front of family. Not like this. The scent of garlic roasted lamb and black truffle risotto now hung heavy in the air, untouched, forgotten. The table, once set to celebrate a quiet reunion of BTS and their families, had become a war zone of unspoken betrayals and emotional landmines. Jungkook's heart thudded in his chest, but his face remained unreadable. He could feel the sting of humiliation laced beneath Jimin's words, and deeper still, the years of complicated friendship, competition, and affection they had both carried, but never truly dissected. He looked around the table, taking in the silence, the flickering eyes, the discomfort worn plainly on every face. "I won't apologize for existing," Jungkook said, not to Jimin this time, but to the entire room. "And I definitely won't apologize for being invited." For a moment, no one breathed. And then it happened. Mrs. Park, Jimin's mother, softly pushed her chair back and stood. She walked around the table slowly, stopping just behind Jungkook. With the gentleness of someone threading a needle, she placed her hand on his shoulder and gave it a tender squeeze. "Thank you for coming, Jungkook," she said, her voice clear and maternal. "You are always welcome at our table." Jimin blinked. His mother rarely spoke during heated moments. Her intervention, quiet as it was, landed with an even heavier punch than Jungkook's words. I didn't mean," Jimin began, eyes flickering between his mother and Jungkook. But the damage had been done. Taehyung finally exhaled, rubbing his temple. Jin looked away, unable to mask his discomfort. Jungkook didn't respond to Jimin's half-formed apology. He stood slowly, bowing toward Mrs. Park, then toward Jimin's father. The muscles in his neck twitched, but he didn't show the ache behind his ribs. "I'm going to step outside," he said. "I think the air will be better company for now." And just like that, he walked with his footsteps soft, his back straight. He didn't slam the door. He didn't look back. But every person in that room would remember the way the silence followed him out, and how, for the first time in a long time, even Jimin couldn't find a single word to say. The heavy wooden door shut with a muffled thud behind Jungkook, sealing him away from the dimly lit chaos of the dining room. Outside, the night was cool and quiet, the soft rustle of leaves whispering secrets in the garden. The moon hung low, casting a silver sheen over the gravel pathway and the distant wrought iron gate. He took a long breath, his chest rising and falling as if trying to shake the weight off his ribs. But it didn't go away. The echo of Jimin's voice still lingered in his head. Why would someone like you sit next to my father? The words hadn't just humiliated him, they had wounded him, reopened something he had worked so hard to keep buried. Jungkook pressed his back against the stone pillar on the veranda and stared at the ground. His fingers twitched. He didn't cry, but his eyes burned. Not because of what was said, but because of who had said it. The click of a door made him stiffen. He didn't turn. Soft footsteps approached from behind, heels crunching lightly over the gravel, then paused just beside him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He could feel her presence before she even said anything. It wasn't fair, came Mrs. Park's voice gently. What he did to you. Jungkook nodded once, his lips tight. I know. He's hurting, but that doesn't excuse his cruelty. Jungkook turned to her, his expression unreadable. Why is he hurting? Her eyes searched his face as if debating whether to say more, but she only sighed. Sometimes the people closest to us carry wounds they never show. And when those wounds get triggered, they lash out, even at those they love. He let out a short, bitter laugh. If that's love, I don't want it. She smiled faintly. Don't say that. You two, you've been through so much. Jungkook looked away, eyes scanning the rose bushes along the edge of the garden. It doesn't justify being humiliated in front of everyone. Not again. Her smile faded. Again? He didn't answer, but she saw the pain in his eyes. She laid a hand on his shoulder again and gave it a warm squeeze before turning away. Come back inside when you're ready, or don't. But know this, my home will never shut its doors to you. As she left, the door remained open a moment longer than necessary before it clicked shut. Jungkook stood in silence for a long while, until the distant sound of voices inside reminded him that he was still technically part of that world, though barely. And then the door creaked open again. This time, it was not Mrs. Park. Are you seriously playing victim right now? Jimin's voice was sharp, slicing through the night like broken glass. His silhouette stood in the doorway, backlit by the chandelier behind him. Jungkook didn't turn around immediately. He waited until Jimin's footsteps drew closer, until he could feel the heat of his breath. Victim? Jungkook finally said, his voice quiet but hard. That's rich. From someone who just tried to publicly humiliate me like it was part of a game. Jimin scoffed. You sat in his chair. Jungkook blinked slowly, turning to face him. Your father offered me that chair. Or do you think I forced him into it? That seat has always been mine. So this is about a chair? Jungkook tilted his head. You're jealous of that? You know what it represents, Jimin snapped. My father never gave me that kind of... He stopped, biting down on the emotion rising in his throat. Jungkook's eyes narrowed. This isn't about me. This is about whatever's going on between you and your father. Don't drag me into it like I'm the villain in your unresolved trauma. You wouldn't understand, Jimin muttered. Then help me, Jungkook said firmly. Help me understand, because right now it just looks like you hate me for something I didn't do. Jimin laughed bitterly. You always do this. Always come off as the innocent one. The golden boy. Everyone's favorite. Perfect Jungkook. You think I haven't seen how they look at you now? How High parade you around like you're the face of everything we've built together? Jungkook froze. So that was it. The jealousy, the resentment, the slow cracks that had started forming long ago but had been carefully painted over in photos, interviews, rehearsals. I never asked for that, Jungkook said slowly. You think I like being put on a pedestal while you're asked to stand behind it? Jimin looked away, eyes glistening. Maybe I do. There was silence between them. Only the wind dared speak now. I admired you, Jimin, Jungkook whispered, his voice trembling. From the beginning, you were the one who showed me what stage presence meant, how to own a crowd, how to deliver with emotion. I watched you and thought, If only I could be like him. Jimin blinked, startled. But somewhere along the way, Jungkook continued, you started resenting me, and I don't even know when it started. I kept trying to earn your approval, kept trying to make you proud. But every time I got praise, every time someone mentioned my name first, your eyes darkened, like it was a crime to succeed. Jimin was shaking now, fists clenched at his sides. You didn't just insult me tonight, Jungkook said. You tried to reduce everything I am to a mistake, in front of people who once loved us both. Jimin turned his back, wiping his eyes quickly. You wouldn't understand, he repeated, weaker this time. My dad, he never said he was proud, not once. But tonight, he looked at you like you were his son. Jungkook stepped closer, but not too close. Then maybe he's learning, and maybe that's okay. Maybe he's trying. You don't have to fight that. Jimin shook his head. It's not that simple. I know, Jungkook said gently, but maybe we can start being honest. You feel invisible, I get it, but that doesn't mean you have to make me feel small to make yourself feel seen. Jimin didn't respond. Jungkook let the silence breathe for a few seconds, then quietly added, you said I always play the victim, but sometimes I am the victim, Jimin. So are you. We both are. And sometimes we hurt each other without even knowing how deep the cuts go. Jimin slowly turned to face him. The anger in his eyes softened now into something more fragile. Then, what do? We stop pretending, Jungkook replied. We stop hiding behind rehearsals and interviews and smiles. We talk, really talk. And we stop turning every shared stage into a competition. I don't know if I can, Jimin whispered. I've lived in comparison my whole life. Jungkook stepped forward and held out a hand. Then let's stop comparing. Start rebuilding. Jimin stared at the hand for a long time. And then, slowly, almost hesitantly, he took it. Not everything was forgiven. Not everything was solved. But for the first time in a long time, something between them shifted. Not back to what it was, but maybe toward what it could be. Behind them, inside the house, conversation had slowly resumed. Laughter was starting to return. But outside, beneath the moonlight and the rose-perfumed wind, two young men stood on the edge of a difficult truth, facing it with open wounds and unspoken hopes. And in that fragile moment, it wasn't fame, legacy, or power that mattered. It was the terrifying, liberating decision to try again. Together. You don't know the whole story, Jungkook. Jimin's voice echoed faintly in the corridor just behind the family room, swallowed by the marble and wood walls, but sharp enough to pierce through Jungkook's chest like a dagger. They had both walked back inside after the intense conversation in the garden, but something had shifted, not peace, not resolution, but tension on the brink of combustion. Jungkook turned slowly, his eyes steady. Then tell me, I'm tired of guessing. Jimin hesitated. His knuckles were pale, clutching something tightly in his hand, a small black flash drive. It gleamed under the golden chandelier light like a shard of truth that had been kept locked away too long. Follow me, Jimin said, voice low. Without another word, he turned down the back hallway, leading Jungkook past the library and down the creaky wooden stairs that spiraled into the basement of the park residence. Jungkook followed, his senses heightened, the air growing colder with every step. It smelled of aged wood, dust, and something else in nostalgia laced with regret. The basement was nothing like the rest of the pristine house. It was raw, real. Shelves of old music books lined the walls, along with family memorabilia, faded photographs, and instruments gathering dust. In the center sat an old upright piano, its keys yellow but still intact. But the centerpiece wasn't the room, it was the projector screen pulled down over one side of the wall. Jimin plugged in the flash drive to the projector system and stared at the black screen. Jungkook didn't move. He stood behind him, watching carefully. These were recorded 6 years ago, Jimin said softly. Right before we went on that world tour, my dad made me record personal logs, like therapy. Said I needed to process things I couldn't say to anyone else. He clicked the remote. The screen flickered to life. And then Jimin appeared. Not the Jimin standing in the room now. A younger, leaner, more vulnerable version of him. Eyes puffy, voice shaky. I feel like I'm disappearing, the Jimin in the video said. Everyone loves Jungkook. He's amazing, talented, but I'm not okay. Jungkook inhaled sharply. The sound of Jimin's past cracking open hit harder than he expected. He doesn't mean to steal the spotlight, the video continued, but he does, and I hate myself for feeling this way. I'm the Hyung. I should be proud. I should be better. The video paused. Jimin looked at Jungkook without turning. I never meant to hate you. I meant to protect you, but I got lost somewhere. Jungkook felt something heavy settle in his throat. He stepped closer, fingers curling at his sides. You could have told me, he whispered. I tried, but you kept smiling. You kept winning. I didn't want to be the bitter one, so I buried it so deep I forgot who I was. The silence was immense. Then Jungkook said something that surprised even himself. I wanted to be you. Jimin turned, brows furrowed. What? I wanted to dance like you, to move like you, to own the stage like you did when no one else could. I felt like an imposter, like no matter how hard I worked, I was still the youngest trying to be enough. Jimin's shoulders slumped. But you are enough. You've always been. Then why did you break me in front of everyone? Jimin's voice cracked. Because I hated myself, and you reminded me of everything I'd lost. They stared at each other, two hearts naked, two egos cracked wide open. Jungkook walked to the screen and stared at the frozen image of young Jimin. You were crying. I cried a lot back then. Why did your father make you record these? Jimin swallowed. To keep me from exploding. But I never thought I'd show them to you. Why now? Because I was about to lose you forever, Jimin said, and I couldn't live with that. Jungkook leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. You didn't just hurt me, Jimin. You humiliated me. You made me feel like trash in front of people who matter to me. I know. And now what? A flash drive is supposed to make it better? No, Jimin said quietly. But maybe it helps you see I'm not your enemy. Jungkook closed his eyes. The room was thick with the weight of unspoken apologies and years of repressed truths. Then something else happened. The projector screen went dark. A new file began to play. Wait, what's this? Jimin asked, confused. It was footage neither of them recognized. The screen lit up to show a hidden recording taken from a phone. In it, Bang Si-hyuk sat in a private room with a man in a suit. They were discussing BTS's future. We'll keep Jungkook in front, Bang Si-hyuk said. He's the marketable face, charismatic, reliable. Jimin is emotional, unstable. Jimin's breath caught. Keep him around, he's still useful, the man in the suit said. Jungkook felt his blood go cold. Who recorded this? Jimin whispered, stepping back. Jungkook picked up the flash drive and checked the files. Hidden folder, unlabeled. This wasn't supposed to be here, he said. Someone planted it. A new kind of silence filled the room. They had stumbled into something bigger. Jungkook looked up at Jimin. This changes everything. Jimin was pale. They used me. They used both of us. Everything, every argument, every shift in public image, every whispered doubt was no longer just between the two of them. There had been strings pulled behind the scenes, manipulations, narratives created for profit. We were puppets, Jimin said bitterly. No, Jungkook replied. We were brothers, and they tried to make us forget that. Jimin looked like he might collapse. Jungkook caught him before he did. We need to talk to the others, Jungkook said. This isn't just about us anymore. Jimin nodded, clutching Jungkook's arm. But Jungkook knew something else. The next move would not be just about reconciliation. It would be about revelation. And no one, especially not Bang Si-hyuk, was ready for what they were about to uncover. You knew about this, didn't you? Taehyung's voice cracked like dry wood under pressure as he stormed into the dark room where Jungkook and Jimin stood frozen. His eyes, usually soft, warm, anchored with calm, were flaring with something raw. Accusation, betrayal, fear. Jungkook turned around slowly, still gripping the flash drive in his hand as though it might shatter from the weight of everything it now represented. Taehyung, he began, but his voice was quiet, cautious, and it only ignited the flame further. Don't Taehyung me right now, he snapped. You two, you kept this? You watched that video and thought you could just handle it alone? Jimin blinked, speechless. We didn't even know it was on there. Oh, but now that you do, you just stand here whispering in the dark like this is some secret club? Taehyung's voice had risen, rough and strangled. We're supposed to be brothers. Jungkook closed his eyes for a moment, then lifted the flash drive and handed it over. Taehyung didn't take it. Instead, he stepped back and looked between them, his chest heaving. Do you understand what this means? They were manipulating us for years. They labeled Jimin unstable. They called you marketable. They used those labels to pit us against each other. Jimin's jaw clenched. They turned my pain into a narrative. They knew I was struggling and they fed it because it made for better drama. And they exploited Jungkook's consistency, Taehyung added, voice low now trembling. Told him to smile more, sing better, train harder until he couldn't sleep without rehearsing in his dreams. The room went silent except for the sound of their breathing. It felt like the walls were listening. And maybe they were. Taehyung finally stepped forward and took the flash drive. His hand trembled as he held it. We need to show this to the others. Tonight. They'll never believe us, Jimin said. They'll think we faked it. Hybe will bury it the moment it reaches the surface. Then we don't go through Hybe, Jungkook said. Both of them looked at him. Jungkook met their eyes, his expression resolute. We go to them as family, not as co-workers, not as idols, but as brothers. And if they don't believe us, then maybe this band never really existed the way we thought it did. They stared at him for a moment. Then Jimin whispered, You'd risk it all? Jungkook's reply came fast. What are we even holding on to if this is the truth? If our entire story was choreographed from the start, every win, every conflict, every viral moment, then none of it means anything. Taehyung exhaled sharply. So what do we do? Jungkook looked up at him. We burned the script. That night, the three of them sat in the old studio on the second floor, the room where many of their earliest songs had been written, where confessions had been made through melody instead of words. The speakers were off, the equipment silent. No one touched an instrument. The rest of the members Namjoon, Jin, Yoongi, and Hoseok sat in a semicircle, unaware of the storm that had been building. Namjoon was the first to sense the tension. He always did. What's going on? He asked. Taehyung stood, slipping the flash drive into the laptop. He didn't speak until the file was loaded and the video began to play. The room shifted. At first, confusion, then unease, and finally, disbelief. The secret recording of Bang Si-hyuk and the executive filled the speakers. The way they referred to the member Sa's products, roles, chess pieces felt unreal, like some twisted fiction. But the timestamp proved otherwise. Yoongi leaned forward, his brow furrowed deeper than anyone had ever seen. Hoseok's mouth hung slightly open, a tremor running down his fingers. Jin stood up and walked to the window, turning his back. Namjoon didn't say a word. He just sat there, eyes locked on the screen, even after the video ended, as if waiting for it to lie. It didn't. You're telling me, he finally said, slowly, that for the last decade, they've been using us? They crafted our hierarchy, Jungkook said. They didn't just manage us, they manipulated how we saw each other. Jimin added, they fed insecurities, turned us into characters for a story we didn't know we were part of. Hoseok stood abruptly. So what now? We release this? What happens after that? Do you know the weight of what you're suggesting? Yoongi finally spoke. It's not just our careers on the line, it's everyone connected to us. The stylists, the dancers, the producers, the fans. Namjoon's voice was soft, almost broken. Army. That word silenced them all. Army. They had been the anchor through everything. The silent witness to every stage performance, every award speech, every tear. Would they understand? Or would this destroy their faith? Jungkook stood. They deserve the truth. But not like this, Namjoon said. Not raw, not chaotic. They'll be hurt, confused. We need to tell them on our terms, our voice, not through a leak. Taehyung looked at him. You're saying we create our own story? Namjoon nodded. If we release this, we don't just expose them, we redefine us. Jin turned back from the window. But do we survive it? No one answered. Later that night, after the others had left, Jimin and Jungkook remained in the studio. It was past 2 a.m. Jungkook sat at the piano, fingers hovering over the keys but not pressing. Jimin lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned in slow circles. Do you think we ever really loved each other? Jimin asked, his voice barely audible. Jungkook looked down at the keys. I think we did, but we forgot how. What if the fans only loved the idea of us? not who we really are. Then we show them who we are now. Jimin closed his eyes. And if they leave, Jungkook whispered, then we still have each other. There were no cameras, no managers, no scripts, just two voices in the dark. In the morning, the decision was made. They would release a documentary, not a flashy, celebratory one, but a raw, unfiltered look at who they were, what they endured, and what had been done behind the scenes. They would film everything themselves. They would speak their truths, and they would let the world choose whether to believe it. The final scene of that day was captured by an old camcorder Jimin found in the basement. It showed Jungkook looking straight into the lens, his voice steady. No more lies, no more illusions. This is BT's not the one you were sold, but the one we really are. The camera kept rolling even after he stopped speaking, because silence, now, was just as powerful as the truth. And both were finally theirs to own. Delete it, now. Those words didn't come from a stranger. They didn't come from a hostile outsider or a disconnected executive. They came from the very person they least expected. Bang Si-hyuk stood in the doorway of the old studio like a shadow that had always been there, watching from the sidelines, waiting for the right moment to strike. His voice was steady, too calm, laced with the kind of threat that didn't need to be loud to feel dangerous. Namjoon stood up, blocking the screen with his body as the last clip of their camcorder rolled in the background. A shaky frame of Jimin looking into the lens saying, "We were broken and no one noticed." The words echoed eerily into the charged silence. "No," Namyeon said, voice firm. Bang didn't blink. "This footage cannot be released. You know what happens if it goes public." Jungkook stepped forward, fists clenched, face pale but burning. "They'll know the truth. That's all we've ever wanted. The truth." "The truth doesn't set you free in this industry," Bang replied, his voice turning cold. "It ruins everything." Yoongi stood as well, arms crossed tightly. "You mean your everything?" "It's not just mine," Bang snapped. "It's your legacy, your lives, your families, the industry. You tear down this wall and you bury a generation under it. You really want to carry that weight?" Jimin looked him dead in the eye. "You already put that weight on us, since the beginning." Bang took a step into the room. The door behind him stayed open, and behind it stood two assistants, faceless, silent, alert. "Do you think you built this alone?" he asked, voice rising. "Do you think your talent is what made the world love you? I shaped this, I curated it. You were nothing more than threads I wove into a story. I made you into gods." Jungkook took a shaky breath. "No, you tried to make us puppets, but you forgot we feel, we break, we bleed, we remember." Bang's eyes darkened. "You leaked that footage, and the company sues you. Every member. Your contracts become shackles. Every endorsement deal gone. Every sponsor terminated. You'll be blacklisted." "We don't care," Jimin said, his voice trembling but sharp. "Not anymore." "Don't be naive," Bang spat. "You don't survive this. You vanish." Namjoon stepped forward. "Then let us vanish. But at least we vanish free." For a second, Bang Si-hyuk looked genuinely stunned, his mask cracked. He hadn't expected them to be unified. He hadn't expected to lose control. He straightened his coat, adjusting his cufflinks with precision. "You want to be martyrs? Fine, but don't come crying when they forget your names." He turned to leave. "Wait." It was Jin who spoke. Everyone turned. Jin walked over to Bang with a strange calm in his eyes, something ancient and unshakable. "You made us famous, but we made us unforgettable." Bang paused. "You don't get to rewrite history anymore," Jin said. "You lost that right the moment you tried to erase who we really were." With that, Bang walked away. The assistants followed, the door slammed, and in that slam, something broke something long overdue. The following days were chaos. The members went silent publicly, but behind closed doors, their world was on fire. HYBE issued statements of denial. Legal teams were mobilized. PR departments scrambled to prepare contingencies. But the boys had already made their choice. The documentary Unscripted was edited in secrecy, across cloud drives and hidden backups, with encrypted communications and trust no one outside the circle. Yoongi took over audio. Jungkook spent sleepless nights reviewing footage. Jimin added voiceover straw, unscripted, unfiltered, and heartbreakingly honest. Meanwhile, rumors flooded the internet. Fan accounts noticed their social media silence. Edits began surfacing, conspiracies running wild, some uncomfortably close to the truth. The night before release, they met in the practice room one last time. The same room where they had spent years sweating, crying, laughing, dreaming. Namjoon looked at each of them. Once it's out, there's no going back. Hoseok nodded. Then we don't look back. Taehyung reached out his hand. Together, one by one, their hands joined, fingers interlocked. No stylists, no stage lights, no performance. Just 7 boys who had started this journey with nothing but a dream and each other. They released unscripted at midnight Korean Standard Time. Not through Hybe, not through streaming platforms, but on their own terms. A simple website, a single post, no countdown, no promotion, just a link. And the words, "This is us, not the version you were given, but the one we lived." The site crashed within an hour. ARMY exploded across the globe. The documentary trended in over 50 countries. Hashtags ignited. People wept. People screamed. People got angry. But above all, they listened. The footage didn't just expose corruption, it exposed pain, humanity, love that had been twisted, friendships that had been tested, and truth that had been gagged for too long. There were scenes that broke people. Yoongi holding Jungkook as he sobbed into a towel backstage, whispering, "You're not weak, you're just tired of being strong." Jin pacing in a hotel room alone, whispering into his phone, "I miss home, but I don't even know where that is anymore." Jimin screaming into a pillow after a show, "Why do I only feel alive when I'm performing?" Taehyung staring into the camera saying, "I've forgotten how to be myself. I'm always someone else." And Namjoon closing his journal saying, "They call me the leader, but sometimes I feel like I'm leading them off a cliff." The final scene showed all 7 sitting in a circle on a rooftop overlooking Seoul. No music, no script, just tears, laughter, silence, and then Jungkook's voice. "We may fall after this, but if we Dao fall as ourselves." The world shattered, and then rebuilt. Fans didn't abandon them. They fought for them. A global wave of support slammed into Hybe like a tidal storm. Hashtags demanding justice, fan protests outside headquarters, billboard ads paid by ARMY displaying quotes from the documentary. Other artists came forward. Whispers became screams. Truth became revolution. Hybe tried to suppress it, tried to spin narratives, blamed editing, denied the recordings, cited loyalty clauses. But it was too late. The illusion had cracked, and the world had seen the boys behind the brand. The question now wasn't whether BTS would survive. It was whether the system that broke them ever would. And as for the boys, they didn't just rise. They freed themselves. Not into fame, but into truth. The sun had barely risen when Jungkook's phone vibrated on the nightstand. He hadn't slept. None of them had. He'd been lying in bed with his eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling as the weight of what they had done kept pressing down on his chest like a concrete slab. His throat was dry, his hands numb, but his heart beat like a war drum, thumping with the energy of 1,000 sleepless memories. He reached for the phone. A message from an unknown number. "Check your email, now, see." His breath hitched. He opened the laptop beside him and logged in. The inbox was flooded, thousands of emails, fan messages, media requests, death threats, love letters, legal warnings. It was a storm, but one email stood out. Subject, confidential, termination addendum, 2019 draft. He clicked it, and what he saw made his entire body go cold. Attached was a PDFan official Hybe internal document. Not just any document. It was a contract tone he'd never seen before. Signed in 2019, stamped, legal, but his name was on it. So were the other members. And at the bottom, in bold red ink, mandatory image retention clause, section 12. He scrolled faster. The words blurred. They weren't just controlling their schedules, their interviews, their press. They had clauses buried in the fine print that dictated how they were allowed to express grief, who they could publicly date, when they were permitted to show visible signs of emotional instability, what kind of social media content was aligned with group values. Jungkook sat up straight, heart pounding. These weren't management contracts. They were chains. A knock on the door jolted him back into the room. It was Jimin, pale, shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. You saw it? Jimin asked before even stepping in. Jungkook nodded and turned the screen toward him. Jimin walked closer, then slowly sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the document like it was a ghost. I never signed this. They forged it, Jungkook said. They forged our names. Taehyung burst into the room next, holding his phone in his trembling hands. Yoongi just called. He found another one, a different clause dated back to 2017, something about psychiatric manipulation. Jimin looked up. Wait, what? They forced him into silence after his breakdown that year, Taehyung said. He thought he was being protected. They made him sign a non-disclosure agreement when he was too unstable to understand what he was agreeing to. Jungkook stood up, walking to the mirror. His own reflection stared back-haunted. He pressed his palms against the dresser. This was never just about control. This was abuse. Jimin whispered, and they have everything documented. Everything we ever said, every slip, every mistake, recorded, stored, labeled. They turned us into a product, Taehyung muttered, and when that product cracked, they just edited around the damage. Namjoon arrived moments later, followed by Jin and Rosé. They all knew now. It was out, exposed, the contract, the clauses, the manipulation. Hybe wasn't just trying to suppress the documentary, they were trying to protect the legal infrastructure that allowed them to own the members' humanity. Yoongi's on his way here, Namjoon said. He said he's done hiding. When Yoongi arrived, he didn't say anything. He walked straight into the living room, placed a small digital recorder on the coffee table, and pressed play. It was his own voice. From years ago. I begged them to let me take time off, the recording said, but they told me my mental health wasn't severe enough. They said I needed to perform or risk irreversible damage to the brand reputation. Yoongi's voice, cracked and quiet, continued. They said I was being dramatic, that I was hurting the group, that I should be thankful I still had a place. Jin broke the silence. We have to sue them. Namjoon looked up. If we do, we're not suing an agency. We're suing the machine that built us. I don't care anymore, Yoongi said. If this is what we gave our 20s to then, I want justice for every moment they made us doubt our own emotions. Jungkook nodded slowly. Then we fight. What followed was the beginning of a rebellion, quiet but irreversible. A team of independent legal experts stepped in, offered confidential support, former staff members began to leak documents. An anonymous insider sent a spreadsheet showing years of surveillance notes on behavior, meal logs, body language analysis. Jimin appeared withdrawn today. Jungkook showed signs of fatigue but smiled during rehearsal. The fans were divided. Some didn't want to believe it. Others knew. They had always known. There had been too many hints over the years, too many unnatural silences, too many accidents on camera that were never explained. Jungkook, Jimin, and the others went public again, this time in a live stream. No filters, no background music, no Hybe logo in the corner. Jungkook began, eyes filled with quiet fire. We were not allowed to be human. Jimin took over. We were owned. Every laugh, every tear, every silence was rehearsed. Yoongi looked into the camera and said, "This is no longer about BTS. This is about every artist who has been controlled, silenced, rewritten." Army exploded. Trending worldwide. Media outlets scrambled to catch up, but the fans were faster. They translated, they shared, they archived everything. Millions of tweets, petitions, exposés. And then Hybe responded. A press conference. Bang Si-hyuk himself. He denied everything, called it slander, accused the members of betrayal, called their claims a distortion of reality fueled by ego and emotion. That was his mistake, because right after the broadcast ended, Taehyung uploaded a video. It showed Bang Si-hyuk in a private meeting from 2 years ago, saying the words, "Let's push Jimin's tears in this documentary. Fans eat that up. We need Jungkook looking isolated makes him more mysterious. Yoongi's burnout? Tell him to channel it. Depression sells if packaged right." The clip went viral in less than 15 minutes. This time, there was no walking it back. Hybe stock crashed overnight. Multiple brand partners announced they were suspending sponsorships with the agency pending investigation. Former employees began stepping forward under anonymous identities. Even rival agencies began quietly voicing support, citing similar internal practices long ignored. The world had changed. But at what cost? Jungkook sat alone in his room that night, reading a letter from his mother. She had watched the live stream. She had watched everything. "My son," she wrote, "I'm sorry I believed your smile without seeing your pain. I'm sorry I trusted the brand more than I trusted your silence. But now I see you, and I've never been more proud." He wept quietly, not because he was broken, but because for the first time, he was beginning to heal. And he wasn't alone. Across the city, Jimin was doing the same. Taehyung, curled up on his couch, phone buzzing endlessly, was replying only to one message, "Are you okay?" Namjoon, on his rooftop, looking up at the stars that had always guided him in lyrics, now whispered a prayer not for success, but for peace. Yoongi, headphones on, was composing again. Not because he had to, but because he finally wanted to. And somewhere, in the darkness of his apartment, Jin stood in front of the mirror with tears in his eyes and whispered, "We made it out alive." BTS wasn't ending. They were beginning again. As people. As brothers. As truth tellers. And this time, no one, not Hybe, not the industry, not the lies could take that away from them. Jungkook stood in the empty rehearsal room, staring at the cracked mirror wall like it owed him an explanation. The scuff marks on the floor whispered of all the sweat they'd poured into this place. Every scratch, every dent was a history carved into wood and steel. But tonight, the silence in that room wasn't nostalgic, it was suffocating. And behind him, the door creaked open slowly. It was Jimin. His footsteps were careful, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to exist in this moment. His voice, though soft, carried the weight of something heavy. "They froze our accounts." Jungkook didn't turn around. I figured they would. All of them, even the personal ones. They claimed security breaches. He closed his eyes. And the legal team? They're getting threats, anonymous calls. One of them quit this morning. Now he turned. Jimin looked exhausted, not just from the lack of sleep or the emotional battle, but from years of carrying what was never his to bear alone. The boy who once smiled the brightest on stage now had shadows under his eyes that no lighting could hide. "I don't know how much longer we can do this," Jimin whispered. Jungkook stared at him, then said the thing he hadn't dared say for days. "Then maybe we stop fighting." Jimin's head snapped up. "What?" "Maybe we don't need to keep burning ourselves to prove a point to the people who never cared whether we survived in the first place." "So we just let them win?" Jimin's voice cracked. "No," Jungkook said. "We walk away before they break us." There was a long silence. "I thought the truth would set us free," Jimin finally said, bitter laughter curling under his breath. "But it's just another prison, just prettier." Jungkook stepped forward. "You know what scares me more than Hybe?" Jimin shook his head. "That we'll never be able to trust the industry again. That no matter where we go, we'll see their shadows in every contract, every award, every fan chant." Jimin sank onto the floor, burying his face in his hands. And then the door opened again. This time, it was Yoongi. His face was pale, but his eyes were burning. "I need you both to come with me, now." Neither of them moved. Yoongi didn't wait. They're trying to make Jin sign a termination agreement with a gag clause. If he signs it, he's legally barred from speaking about BTS in any public or private setting, ever. Jimin stood instantly. "Where is he?" "Conference room downstairs. Alone. They called him in without telling anyone." Jungkook didn't even put on shoes. They ran through the corridors like they were chasing time itself. The building was darker than usual. Most of the lights dimmed. Security guards patrolled the halls like silent ghosts, pretending not to notice them. But every step felt heavier, like they were walking deeper into the mouth of something that wanted to consume them whole. When they reached the glass-walled conference room, they saw him. Jin sat at the long table, alone, staring down at a thick stack of papers. Across from him, two Hybe executives in dark suits whispered to each other, occasionally glancing at their watches like time itself was a form of control. Yoongi barged in first. "Stop." The room froze. Jin looked up. His eyes were red. Jungkook stepped beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Hyung, don't sign anything." One of the executives stood. "This doesn't concern you. This is between the company and Kim Seokjin." "It concerns all of us," Jimin snapped. You can't erase our existence just because it's inconvenient. We're offering him protection, the other executive said calmly. It's in his best interest. Jin didn't speak. He simply looked at Jungkook. Do you know what they said to me? Jungkook didn't answer. He waited. They said I could finally live a peaceful life, that all I had to do was forget. Forget? Jimin echoed, his voice trembling. Forget the pain. Forget the memories. Forget BTS. Jin held up the pen slowly. And then, in one swift movement, he snapped it in half. Ink splattered across the contract. The room gasped. I'd rather be poor and honest than rich and hollow, he said quietly. One of the executives reached for their phone. Don't, Yoongi said. There was fire in his voice. This ends now. No more signatures, no more threats. We'll ruin you, the taller executive said, voice dripping with arrogance. You think the public will keep loving you when we start leaking the footage we have? The fights, the breakdowns, the deleted scenes, will show them how you really are. Jungkook stepped forward. Then do it. Excuse me? Leak it. Show the world what you made us become. They stared at him. I dare you, he said, voice like stone, because the moment you do, Army will know exactly who broke us. The room fell into a heavy silence. Jin stood. Tell Bang Si-hyuk I said this, he said to the executives. You may have started this story, but we're the ones who will finish it. They left the room without another word. That night, the members gathered in Namjoon's apartment. For hours, no one spoke. And then Taehyung broke the silence. I found something. They looked at him. He held up his phone. There's a hidden contract, one that predates the first BTS agreement, signed by Bang and a now deceased co-founder. It includes terms about intellectual ownership of our names, our images, our personalities. Jungkook leaned forward. What does that mean? It means, Taehyung said slowly, they don't just own our music, they own our identities. The room erupted. Hosea cursed under his breath. Jimin stood and paced. Jin covered his mouth. Yoongi punched the wall. And Namjoon sat quietly, hands folded, head bowed. This was never about money, he finally said. This was about ownership. They didn't just want to control our careers. They wanted to erase our humanity and replace it with a brand. Jungkook's voice was low, furious. So we burn it down. They all looked at him. He met every one of their eyes. Everything they built, every lie, every manipulation, we don't just expose it, we dismantle it. Jimin whispered, and if we lose everything? Jungkook said without hesitation, then we lose it together. Yoongi added, but we'll finally be free. The next day they announced it. BTS was terminating all contracts with HYBE, effective immediately. They would forfeit millions. They would lose rights to old music. They would be blacklisted from most major Korean networks. But they didn't flinch, because the one thing they refused to lose ever again was themselves. And so, under the soft dawn light, 7 men walked into the unknown, no longer idols manufactured by a system, but artists, survivors, brothers, not chasing fame, but reclaiming their names. The first headline broke at 7:43 a.m. BTS declares war on HYBE, contract terminated, legal firestorm ignites. By 8:01, Korean news stations were broadcasting emergency press updates. By 8:15, international media picked it up, CNN, BBC, The Guardian, Variety, every language. Every screen. The ripple wasn't a ripple. It was a collapse, a dismantling. The dam broke. By 9:00 a.m., people were outside HYBE headquarters with posters. Some chanted, some cried. Others simply stared at the glass building that had once symbolized hope, but now looked like a tower built from betrayal. Inside a cramped van parked 3 blocks away, BTS sat in silence. None of them were dressed in designer outfits. There was no stylist, no glam, no handler tapping at a tablet with the next scheduled press appearance. They were alone, 7 men. Hoodies, ball caps, shadows under their eyes, and determination in their bones. Jimin clutched his phone. It's trending, all 7 names, even Sok Jin-hyung's military photos everywhere. They're posting his letter from last year, the one about trusting us. It's being quoted on national television. Namjoon nodded slowly. I expected noise, but not this fast. Taehyung looked up from the back seat. You still think we made the wrong call? Jungkook didn't answer right away. His eyes were fixed on the thick file folder in his lap. Inside were over 200 pages of evidence fake contracts, voice memos, abusive text messages, screen captures from blackmailed staff members, financial forensics. They had enough proof to bring down not just an agency, but an entire industry structure. He finally looked up. We haven't made a call yet. We're standing at the edge. The fall hasn't even started. Yoongi leaned forward. Then let's push. The van door opened. Flashbulbs hit them like bullets. Dozens of cameras, phones shaking in trembling hands. Some screamed, some simply gasped. The 7 of them walked silently past the sea of press toward the Seoul Supreme Court building. The moment the lawsuit was filed, it would become public record. They were suing HYBE for breach of contract, psychological abuse, illegal surveillance, defamation, and identity exploitation. The lawsuit would name names. Bang Si-hyuk, every board member, even select department heads who had coordinated the image manipulation strategies they'd only recently discovered coded emails with subject lines like Phase 3, Isolate Jimin, Reinforce Jungkook's solo shadow. As they entered the building, a young female reporter managed to break through the police tape and asked, breathlessly, "Do you think Army will still stand by you after this?" Namjoon turned his head and without stopping said, "They always have, even when they didn't know it." The file was submitted. It was done. At 10:32 a.m., BTS filed one of the most explosive lawsuits in Korean entertainment history. And at 11:06, Bang Si-hyuk held a press conference.